us lately. We helped in the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. We were the cybersecurity partner for the Olympics, where we helped stop almost 450 million attacks during the Tokyo Olympics. We've also worked a lot in the past with law enforcement to help take down botnet groups. Specifically in 2020, we worked with the FBI and Microsoft and a couple other partners to help try to do a takedown of the TrickBot group, which is quite an infamous Russian cybercrime group. Within NTT Security Holdings, we have 2 security operations centers, one in Gothenburg, Sweden, and one in Tokyo. There we have almost 100 different people working within those SOCs, and they're backed by up to another 200 technical people working within threat intelligence and research and development. Our prime focus is really working on the front lines of advanced detection and response. So this is kind of our journey. We actually started as a very small company in Gothenburg called Secode 23 years ago. There might even be a few people that might remember that name. The founders of the company are actually still there today. They're still with the company. But about 10 years ago, as NTT was moving into the cybersecurity market, they wanted to start providing MSS services, managed security services. And they started looking around the world at who were the top geographic players. And in the Nordics, they found Secode and they acquired them for some of the really interesting capabilities in terms of advanced detection and response that were built there. So for about 10 years, we've been doing threat detection globally as part of the NTT group. And then about a year ago, what we've decided to do now is actually take our strategy and focus purely on detection and response into one platform that we can offer and our services around that. So we came out with Samurai XDR. This is extended detection and response. So in cybersecurity nowadays, there's a few different ways that you can really create a detection and response program at a high level. 2 of those ways is kind of taking more of a closed native approach. That's where you're taking one vendor and you're really focusing in on that vendor to create a high quality solution. The other is taking more of an open approach. This is where you're working in a best of breed. You're taking the best EDR, you're taking the best proxy, you're taking the best firewall, and you're figuring out how to bring all that together to be able to do detection and response. So that's our focus. We are more of an open style. And that's the strategy that we've been doing for many years. Our entire foundation is built on that. Over the years where we've been able to work in that capacity, taking in different types of vendors, integrating with them to actually bring that telemetry, we call it, to be able to do extended detection response across all the different silos of an organization. So for us, Samurai is really, it's an evolution of our capabilities and our strategy. So for the actual talk though, we're talking about IT-OT convergence. This is something that's been talked about a lot recently. We work very closely with a partner of ours. As I said, we are an open XDR. So we integrate with the absolute best of the best vendors out there for each of those areas. So over the last month, a colleague of mine from Clarity, they're an OT cybersecurity company, hyper specialized in doing amazing detection and response within OT environments. We've been doing breakfast seminars across the Nordic capitals, from Stockholm and Copenhagen. And it's been really interesting because I'm coming from more of an IT cybersecurity background, but it's my counterpart at Clarity. He's an electrical engineer, an automation engineer, and he's really coming from an OT background. So it was really interesting to be able to hear from him what is happening in OT. What does this convergence actually look like? He talks a lot about
OT. Clarify.
Operational technology.
Thank you.
Sorry. Yeah. So this is something, a different type of network in factories and so on. Critical infrastructure. Yeah.
SCADA gave it to you.
Yeah. Good one. I should have pointed that out. But what we see very often that these OT networks, they've been very segmented. Very little visibility in there, because for OT networks, it's all about availability. It's about making sure that that factory is working 24/7 and nothing is ever going down. What they've done is they've often just segmented. What we see now, though, is a real convergence between IT connected to OT and OT to the cloud especially. So there's solutions out there, operational solutions, such as Siemens MindSphere, if anybody might have heard of. This is a really interesting solution that is running in the cloud, where they're actually taking sensor data from their OT operations, from factories, for instance. I saw they have hundreds of use cases that you can read through. Well, one specifically, there's a pasta maker. It has pasta factories around the world. And what they've done is they've actually been able to take all this sensor data, bring it into the cloud, and drive more efficient operations, a more efficient way to make pasta. I mean, it sounds interesting, right? But when you're a multi-billion-dollar company, even being able to increase the efficiency of your operations by a few percent is a huge value. So we see a lot of that in IT-OT convergence, specifically this promise of more efficient operations. And as you're doing that, the OT networks that have commonly been very segmented, very little visibility, are becoming more connected. So it's only natural that as that connectivity comes, the attack surface expands, right? There's a lot of challenges in IT/OT. Very often we see two separate cultures within IT security and OT cybersecurity. They don't even speak the same language very often. People having specialized dual competence skills in both simultaneously is a very rare skill set, bordering on unicorn status. I would say Emil from Bravita, when he was talking, he talked a lot about being able to find the right people, and that is a real challenge. We see that threats against OT are on the rise over the past few years. Has anybody heard of Pipe Dream? A couple people? So this is an ICS modular attack framework that they found last year. There's been quite a bit of research done on it. It hasn't actually been used in a live attack, but there's been a lot of research that's gone on within this.
I have a question.
Yep.
Is it really convergence? I want to say it's approach. The IT need to approach the OT, because OT is so completely different. If you're going as a hacker and they try to scan our nuclear systems, they will broke the whole system, because they are old, they are working in real time, and about that you talk about in IT 1 nanosecond. That's not fast in a real-time system.
What we see, like if you look through Pipe Dream, for instance, as a modular attack framework, there's multiple modules for making initial access into IT to start with, and actually move laterally into OT from that. So,
but you can use a USB inside the PLC, and you can use it by connect through the modem that some technician has connected right into the environment.
Sure, there is multiple ways to make an instrument. If you look at the Taiwan semiconductor manufacturer incident in 2018, that was a supplier that plugged into a segmented OT system and actually put malicious software by accident, didn't know, and WannaCry ended up spreading. Caused $250 million in impact. So segmentation on its own is no guarantee of security. But what we see, convergence is just typically the word that is used, but it's talking about connected OT systems, right? That there's new ways now to come into OT. We say that achieving extensive visibility in legacy OT environments is difficult. Very often people haven't even been looking. When it's difficult, but we know that threats are on the rise due to more connected systems, how do we form a holistic security strategy? This is a tough question. OT environments are complex. There's hundreds of different obscure protocols that are being used in these systems. So Gartner puts out predictions. This was one that they put out specifically for this, where they claim that by 2025, 30% of critical infrastructure organizations will suffer a breach that will result in the halting of an operations or mission-critical cyber-physical system. 30%. So for us, What we do with detection and response is our core philosophy is quick detection and rapid response. If you can detect quickly and respond rapidly, it's only logical that there will be little to no impact, or at least you'll be able to minimize it to a negligible amount. So we take this into OT as well, because what we see with IT/OT security is there is real consequences behind attacks against OT systems. So this is just over the last few years. But what we see with the war in Ukraine now is where there is actual cyber attacks against critical infrastructure in combination with kinetic attacks, this so-called hybrid warfare. It's an entire new world. So what can be done? As with IT back in the day, and now we're talking about OT, it is really visibility and threat monitoring. We did talk about the Taiwan semiconductor manufacturing incident. You know, that was based on pure segmentation they had for security. It's no guarantee. So for us, this isn't hypothetical. This is actually something we've been doing for many years now. So this is, you know, we work in cybersecurity. It's tough to get public reference clients. You know, it's a bit of a sensitive industry, right? But we have a very close partnership with BW Offshore. It's one of the largest oil companies in Norway. And they have stuff like this gigantic ship up there. So this is rolling around in the North Sea, and it's connecting, it's pulling up oil, hundreds of meters long, gigantic. How do you get visibility into that? Because this is a connected device, right? They need to be able to connect to this. So how do you protect a network with no visibility? What we see in operational technology networks, OT networks, very often flat architecture, weak authentication, often default credentials being used, lack of encryption, obscure protocols being used, outdated operating systems, because availability is the most important in an OT network, right? There's no time to take things offline to do patching. And that's the lack of patching. So if we look over here, multi-level model, it's known as the Purdue model. At the top, how we do visibility for IT is well defined by this point. We have a very good idea of how we can get visibility into an IT network. But how do we get visibility through the OT networks, all the way down to the control level? So with Samurai, we take that open approach. We work best of breed with the absolute best of the best out there, and we integrate with them. We take the telemetry and the investments they've made to help protect your networks, and then we layer on top of it additional capabilities in terms of correlation, detection capability. So we work very closely with Clarity, who I was doing these breakfast seminars with. They have a couple different devices called the CTD and XDome, and they provide passive monitoring in OT. And part of that is they can do full asset identification within the OT network. They also do threat detection. So this is really core to what our approach is. This is just a subset of vendors that we integrate with for the different silos, as we call them. But the idea of XDR is really to be able to get visibility across all those different silos into a central place, a single pane of glass, we say. So that as attacks are moving through different visibility points, we can still correlate and we can still stitch together the context of that incident. So this is kind of a high-level architecture of what that looks like. On the bottom, we have our platform, which we call Samurai XDR. And on the top, we have our Managed Detection and Response Service. So this is our MDR, this is our SOC that is running in Gothenburg. It is actually running on top of the alerts that are being generated. So we can see in the bottom, we have our IT networks and we have our OT networks. So when this is set up and integrated with Samurai, very easy to do, all that log data starts coming in, the telemetry we call it. It runs through our data processing pipeline. We map it to something called a common information model, and this allows us to do vendor agnostic detection and actually start working with correlation and some advanced techniques to stitch it together. When it's contextualized, alerts are generated and they're sent to our SOC in Gothenburg, where our analysts begin investigating and actually validating, is this a real security incident? From that, we can, once validated, help with taking a quick response to shut down any impact from that. So a bit of a technical drill down. What we see from Clarity is a very good detection capability, specifically for anomalies, known techniques. They work with Snort and Yara for NIDS-based detection, but also looking all the way down for dangerous operational behavior, such as firmware changes. What we do is we take that, one of the absolute points of an OpenXDR approach is that we maximize the security investments you've already made. So by investing in this, of course, we take this kind of threat detection into our engine as well, but we also use it and layer on top our own detection, using different forms of machine learning, kill chain modeling across OT and IT, adding context and threat intelligence into it as well. So I won't go too deep into the technical, but this is just a general idea of how we can do vendor agnostic detection, how we can think about it, so that we can actually do behavior modeling, right? So has everyone heard of TrickBot before? Yeah, a few people. So as mentioned, this is a very infamous Russian cybercrime group. At their peak, they had about 400 to 500 people, it's estimated, working there. They're responsible for absolutely billions of dollars in damage worldwide. So we spent a lot of time analyzing this group because it was causing a lot of problems for a lot of people. So this is the start of an infection chain, as we call it, specifically for TrickBot. And there's different ways when we're looking at it on the wire, when we're checking the network traffic, certain behaviors that can be checked for to create detection. We can see multiple outdated user agents in use, for instance, multiple binary downloads from IP-based URLs disguised as image files. This is one thing that's very common to TrickBot. So these are actually Windows executables, but they are labeled as image files. Multiple post requests towards IP-based URLs, and so on. So this is just a general idea of how we can take one threat and start to build detection based on the behaviors for that in a vendor agnostic way. So just to kind of show how that all comes together, here is a small scenario we put together. So there is an APT group called Energetic Bear. They've actually recently been, a few members been indicted by the US as being related to a group within the Federal Security Service, the FSB, Russian FSB, to a group called Center 16. But what they've done, they were responsible for a lot of OT-based attacks in the last 10 years, specifically with a malware called Havix. What we often saw with that is they were using a watering hole attack for initial access. And this is where they would even target ICS vendor websites, and then they would make redirects in those legitimate websites for people that are coming just to browse. They would be redirected and then served an exploit kit, so they would get execution on that host. So we kind of set it up like that. We've set up an external C2 server, and then once initial access was made, reconnaissance within the IT network, exploitation for lateral movements to the IT-OT DMZ, and then an attack on the objective within the OT domain. So here is a way that we can do behavior modeling. This is something called a K-chain detection for us. So these alerts would have been generated by themselves as well, very often, but we also get a full kill chain because there's very often behaviors that are maybe not as high fidelity, but a string of them together into an actual kill chain can trigger a more high fidelity contextualized incident. So here we can see all the way from the initial exploitation, all the way through reconnaissance, and then attack on the PLC. So IT/OT. There's a good way to do detection for it, but it really comes down to the people. We know that that skill set is extremely rare. Finding analysts that actually understand IT and OT threats. So for us, we've been doing this for a number of years now, monitoring IT and OT networks combined through a single platform. And it is part of our training program. So when new analysts are joining us at the SOC, they undergo a very rigorous training program where they actually get extra training in OT, because it's not very typical to be combined with IT. Our analysts are equipped with a specialist workbench that's been created by us, specifically for being able to do quick validations in OT as well as IT networks. We're pulling in evidence data. So all those integrations that we have running towards best of breed vendors, we're pulling in the evidence data to allow for quicker validations. And I'd say never satisfied with average, the SOC team in Gothenburg and in Tokyo, they regularly compete in cybersecurity competitions, really trying to prove that they're among the elites of the world in terms of being able to work on the front lines and manage detection and response. Last week was, I guess I should ask first, has anybody heard of Splunk's Boss of the SOC? A couple people. So Splunk puts on this competition, multiple competitions yearly, where they invite the best analyst teams to try to compete against each other. So our team, they went to, played in what's considered the European Championships last week. 374 of the best teams from across Europe, and they finished 5th. So this is a team that is very well trained and really well focused on IT/OT. So for me, the key takeaways, if you are responsible for actually doing detection, if your digital transformation strategy is taking you to a place where now you need to start thinking about detection within OT, adding visibility and security monitoring provides the fastest time to value. A real-time detection response capability is absolutely vital for minimizing impact. And there's not many people in the world that are doing this right now. So make sure you work with partners you can trust that have the right expertise. So that's my presentation. Thank you. If you would like to learn more, we're having a few times a year, we put on something called open houses at our Security Operations Center in Gothenburg. And I'd like to invite you all there. If anybody would like to come, just let us know. That's May 31st. Thank you.